just going to read from Hannah's point of view. Let me decide how much I'm going to read. Okay. I'm going to read like 4 pages from Hannah's point of view. This is her first chapter. Want to know my deep, dark secret? In Sunday school, I used to cheat on the quizzes. I could never get into the book of not even as a kid. The only section of the book that interested me at all was Legends and Grievances, which is full of folk tales about the world before the cure. My favorite, the story of Solomon, goes like this. Once upon a time, during the days of sickness, 2 women and an infant went before the king. Each woman claimed that the infant was hers. Both refused to give the child to the other woman and pleaded their cases passionately, each claiming that she would die of grief if the baby were not returned solely to her possession. The king, whose name was Solomon, listened to both their speeches and at last announced that he had a fair solution. We'll cut the baby in 2, he said, and that way each of you will have a portion. The women agreed that this was fair, and so the executioner was brought forward, and with his axe he sliced the baby cleanly in 2. And the baby never cried or so much as made a sound, and the mothers looked on, and afterward, for 1,000 years, there was a spot of blood on the palace floor that could never be cleaned or diluted by any substance. I must have been only 8 or 9 when I read that passage for the first time, but it really struck me. For days I couldn't get the image of that poor baby out of my head. I kept picturing it split open on the tile floor like a butterfly pinned behind glass. That's what's so great about the story. It's real. What I mean is, even if it didn't actually happen, it shows the world truthfully. I remember feeling just like that baby, torn apart by feelings, split in 2, caught between loyalties and desires. That's how the diseased world is. That's how it was for me before I was cured. In exactly 21 days, I'll be married. My mother looks as though she might cry, and I almost hope that she will. I've seen her cry twice in her life. Once when she broke her ankle, and once last year when she came outside and found that protesters had climbed the gate and torn up our lawn and pried her beautiful car into pieces. In the end, she says only, "You look lovely, Hannah," and then, "It's a little too big in the waist." Mrs. Killigan circles me quietly, pinning and adjusting. She is tall, with faded blonde hair and a pinched look, as though over the years she has accidentally ingested various pins and sewing needles. "You're sure you want to go with the cap sleeves?" "I'm sure," I say, just as my mom says. "You think they look too young?" Mrs. Killigan gestures expressively with one long, bony hand. "The whole city will be watching," she says. "The whole country," my mother corrects her. "I like the sleeves," I say, and I almost add, "It's my wedding." But that isn't true anymore. Not since the incidents in January and Mayor Hargrove's death. My wedding belongs to the people now. That's what everybody has been telling me for weeks. Yesterday we got a phone call from the National News Service asking whether they could syndicate footage or send in their own television crew to film the ceremony. Now, more than ever, the country needs its symbols. We're standing in front of a 3-sided mirror. My mother's frown is reflected from 3 angles. "Mrs. Killigan's right," she says, touching my elbow. "Let's see how it looks at 3/4, okay?" I know better than to argue. 3 reflections nod simultaneously. 3 identical girls with identical ropes of braided blonde hair and 3 identical white floor-skimming dresses. Already I hardly recognize myself. I've been transfigured by the dress, by the bright lights in the dressing room. For all my life I've been Hannah Tate, but the girl in the mirror is not Hannah Tate. She is Hannah Hargrove, soon-to-be wife of the soon-to-be mayor, and a symbol of all that is right about the cured world. A path and a road for everyone. "Let me see what I have in the back," Mrs. Killigan says. "We'll slip you into a different style, just so you'll have a comparison." She slides across the worn gray carpet and disappears into the storeroom. Through the open door, I see dozens of dresses sheathed in plastic, dangling limply from garment racks. We've been here for 2 hours already, and I'm starting to feel like a scarecrow, stuffed and poked and stitched. My mother sits on a faded footstool next to the mirrors, holding her purse primly in her lap so it won't touch the carpet. Mrs. Killigan's has always been the nicest wedding shop in Portland, but it, too, has clearly felt the lingering effects of the incidents and the security crackdowns the government implemented in their aftermath. Money is tighter for practically everybody, and it shows. One of the overhead bulbs is out, and the shop has a musty smell, as though it has not been cleaned recently. On one wall, a pattern of moisture has begun bubbling the wallpaper. "You really do look lovely, Hannah," my mother says. "Thank you," I say. "I know I look lovely. It might sound egotistical, but it's the truth. This, too, has changed since my cure. When I was uncured, even though people always told me I was pretty, I never felt it. But after the cure, a wall came down inside me. Now I see that yes, I am quite simply and inarguably beautiful. I also no longer care. Here we are. Mrs. Killigan reemerges from the back, holding several plastic swathed gowns over her arm. I swallow a sigh, but not quickly enough. Mrs. Killigan places a hand on my arm. Don't worry, dear, she says. We'll find the perfect dress. That's what this is all about, isn't it? I arrange my face into a smile, and the pretty girl in the mirror arranges her face with me. Of course, I say. Perfect dress,